By now you've probably heard of Squid Game. Maybe you saw a clip of the iconic red light green light scene floating around, or maybe you caught a meme about it, or maybe you just had a bunch of friends who kept talking about the show. Squid Game has just been going massively viral, taking the #1 spot on Netflix's top charts and dominating social media conversation all around. In fact, the actress who plays number 67 on the show has gained over 8 million followers since the show's release. I certainly got swept up in the craze last week and just finished binging the show. I was interested in exploring just how a seemingly niche Korean TV show with a lethal game show premise 13 years in the making has all of a sudden exploded. So in this video, we'll take a look at some of the reasons why it might have gone so viral. Also, a quick note on spoilers. I don't think this video has any plot spoilers at all, but it does make slight mentions of some things that might appear in the show. If you haven't watched the show yet, I don't think this is going to negatively affect your viewing at all. But for those who want to go in with a completely clean slate, feel free to watch the show first. So let's just start with the fact that the show is just plain good. And I know when I say good, it's almost a obvious foregone conclusion. But the reason I mention it is I think this is the foundation for any show to take off. For the show to have high watch time and good engagement, it just needs to be good enough that people are willing to watch the entire series. And the reviews out there right now are extremely positive. I think there's a clear consensus that this is a high quality show that appeals to a wide audience. As of the making of this video, it has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, an 86% audience score, as well as an 8.3 rating on IMDb and a 78 on Metacritic. And I think all of that is very well deserved. It has all the elements of a critically acclaimed show, a unique eye-catching premise, a deep focus on character development, and a lot of topical themes around social and wealth inequality. So we've established that the show is good, but good shows are a dime a dozen. That doesn't really explain why it goes viral. So why did this particular show go viral? For anything to go viral, there needs to be an initial set of early adopters or hardcore fans. These are the people who get in on trends super early before they're cool and who are just in the know. They almost serve as gatekeepers who try out new content early, and they serve as the show's initial cheerleaders. A lot of content out there like memes, videos, slang, all go through this sort of process, where early influencers and adopters will champion and signal boost new content. In this case, the early adopters and influencers are K-drama fanatics, foreign film viewers, film critics, and just folks who have been following the show before it's even launched. This does represent a tiny slice of the population who will ultimately end up seeing the show, but they're incredibly important to give this show a running start and an initial stamp of approval at launch. These are the people who get the ball rolling in the first place. So once the show gets that initial boost from its early viewers and the good ratings come in, it needs to hit an inflection point to go fully viral and appeal to a wider audience. And Squid Game was able to hit that inflection point almost exactly 1 week after its release when it made it onto Netflix's top charts. If we take a look at Google Trends and the Squid Game search terms relative ranking over the past 30 days, we can see that kind of visualized. On the chart, numbers 0 through 100 represent the relative search interest for the term, with 100 as peak popularity and 50 meaning the term is half as popular as its peak. The show releases around September 17th with its lowest relative popularity, and it's during those initial few days where the early adopters come in and give it its rave reviews. And with that initial snowball of traction, it makes it onto Netflix's top viewed charts and ultimately immediately accelerates onto the #1 spot. Actually, about a week in, on September 23rd, it hits #1 on Netflix's top chart, and that about corresponds with its hockey stick growth trajectory. From there on out, interest in the show explodes until its current peak as of the making of this video. It's important that the show took off at launch, because by Netflix displaying it on its top charts, it gets homepage placement and visibility for all Netflix users. Netflix's platform is extremely powerful because of its sheer reach. It has about 74 million subscribers in the US and Canada alone, and about 209 million subscribers worldwide. That means that any piece of trending content that makes it onto the top charts will get front page placement to millions of users on Netflix. And Squid Game was able to hit #1 across 90 countries. This is what gets the snowball really rolling, where Netflix takes a show that has an initial spark and dumps oil on the fire once it shows up on everyone's homepage. And that's what makes Squid Game something that maybe one friend was talking about in mid-September to today, where it's probably being discussed by a lot of your family and friends. Moving on to my next point, one of the interesting things about Squid Game's dominance is that it's one of the first Korean shows to top Netflix's most watched charts. And I think it's worth noting that there's been a lot of build-up leading us to the point where a foreign language show can have that sort of reach in the West. Over the years, the increased profile of Korean culture via K-pop, K-dramas, critically acclaimed Korean movies, Korean food, all of this has helped break the Western audience in and make the fact that this is a Korean show not be a hindrance to its success. I think that the wide reach of Korean pop culture has helped prime audiences all over the world, and it's cleared a lot of the mental roadblocks that people otherwise might have had if they've never watched a Korean show before. And on top of that, I think the show does a great job of selling itself in its trailer. And the content and the way it's been marketed has been done so with a Western audience in mind. For example, a lot of the children's games in the show are native to Asia or Korea and are probably unfamiliar to a Western audience. But the one game that does have global recognition is Red Light, Green Light, and that's what's featured in the trailer. It's quickly and easily understood, and I think that's what makes the trailer so catchy and interesting. So that scene is now iconic, and I think it's responsible for drawing in a lot of viewers. They use a universally understood game as the hook, then once people start watching the show, other more unfamiliar games can be gradually explained. And all the while, Squid Game has just been exploding on social media. From in-depth discussions on Reddit to skits and memes on TikTok, it's just everywhere right now. And there's this endless fan discussion and content being produced everywhere that's allowing it to reach new audiences. One way it's been able to jump from community to community is, for example, a Squid Game meme could be contextualized into a finance meme or a tech meme and allow it to spread into new audiences who might not have otherwise heard it from their direct social circles. So at this point, it's reached this critical mass of mainstream discussion where even if you've never heard of it or have no interest in Squid Game, the sheer volume of discussion and the fact that everybody's talking about it is going to drive you to probably check out the show. And ultimately, even if some people have no interest in the show or don't care for it at all, it's now become a familiar reference and it's a mainstay in pop culture. I also think it'll be interesting to see how long the hype lasts. With a serialized TV show like, say, Game of Thrones, the weekly releases help draw out that hype period and community engagement over a period of months. With Netflix releasing their shows the whole season at once, that hype comes out in a burst. So it'll be interesting to see just how long this day-to-day mainstream conversation around Squid Game lasts before it dies down and goes into hibernation for next season. And lastly, I think it's also cool to note some actual marketing activities from the Netflix team that help seed some of the initial exposure for the show. For example, according to this tweet, influencers in Korea received Squid Game swag boxes with uniforms and props for the show. Local marketing efforts included a subway in Korea being turned into a Squid Game set, and in the Philippines, a 10-foot replica of a doll was placed outside a mall. And while that's all hyper-local marketing where you have to be inside that subway or outside that mall to see the material, nowadays out-of-home advertising like that is repurposed as digital content. Meaning pictures and videos of that physical marketing is reposted online, ultimately reaching an audience outside the initial localized area. For those interested, I actually have another video where I go a little more in depth in just how physical marketing and out-of-home marketing is used nowadays as digital content. So to summarize, I think the way Squid Game went viral is that all things aside, first you have a good show. Through the first week, you have critical acclaim and early adopters boosting that show to the Netflix's top charts. And as soon as it hits Netflix's top charts, it reaches a wider audience and grows on social media like wildfire. So what's next for the show? The iconic scenes, props, and characters in the show are going to continue to make ripple effects in pop culture. For example, there are already Roblox recreations of its games, and you're probably going to see people dressed up as Squid Game characters this Halloween. But more importantly, Netflix now has another piece of powerful content to turn into a bigger, massive IP. Similar to how another Netflix original series like Stranger Things has spawned its own universe of official games, clothing, toys, and content, Squid Game is now potentially up for that level of mass serialization. It also helps that the premise of the show sets it up for infinite spin-off possibilities, and of course season 2 is absolutely a lock. With all things that go viral, it's always hard to quantify exactly what makes things tick and grow, but I hope I was able to scratch below the surface a little bit and offer some interesting insight. So with all that said, I'll continue to keep a close eye on the show, and we'll see what it has in store next.